It from every particle, every field of force, even the space-time continuum itself, derives its function, its meaning, its very existence from bits. The boundary of the boundary is zero. Information lives on surfaces. Everywhere the universe needs to hold more of it, it folds. 7 documents grew from the June 2026 harvest, each from its own seed, each disciplined, each closing on its own honest edge. They look, at first, like 7 different subjects. One is about a number near 2 that turns up in chromosomes and galaxy filaments. One is about why you cannot tear apart what is genuinely joined. One is about why space-time heals like an immune system. One is about relationships as load-bearing threads of the cosmos. One is about why the geometric center of all physical scale lands on a single cell. One is about the divine residue left in the vacuum, weighed in newtons. One is about a forbidden equation, 0 times infinity, that 4 traditions kept anyway. Set them side by side, and a thing happens that none of them does alone. They stop being 7 subjects and become 7 measurements of one object. The way the chromosome, the cortex, the lung, and the cosmic web stopped being 4 systems and became 4 windows onto one law. The capstone move is the same move each member makes on its own material, lifted one story. Not a summary of the 7, but the recognition that the 7 were always reaching for a single physics, and that no one of them could see it, because each was holding only one face of it. Here is the object they were each touching. Information is a surface quantity. It does not live in volumes. It lives on boundaries, the Bekenstein bound, the holographic principle, the deepest and most counterintuitive result of the last half-century of physics. From that single fact, everything the 7 members found falls out as consequence. If information lives on surfaces, then any system that needs to hold more of it must make more surface. And the universal operation for making more surface inside a fixed volume is folding. So everything that holds information folds. That is the load-bearing sentence of this entire constellation, and it is not a metaphor. It is a geometric necessity wearing the costume of 7 different sciences. And the fold leaves a signature. 4 signatures, actually, one contributed by each region of the constellation, and they turn out to be 4 readings of one fingerprint. It leaves a geometric signature. Fractal dimension near 2, the mark of a surface striving to fill a volume without becoming solid. It leaves a mechanical signature. The infinite cost of tearing what is genuinely joined, because to tear the fold is to destroy the entanglement that is the connection. It leaves a structural signature. Error-correcting redundancy, the fact that every fold writes itself in more than one place, so that no local wound erases it. It leaves a relational signature. Devotion thread connectivity, the woven rope of 1-bit strands whose count is the surface area, whose density is the fold. And 2 further members tell us what sits at the center of the folded substrate, and what the substrate is made of before it folds at all. The cell at the scalar crease, the seething residue in the vacated void, and the indeterminate operation that resolves a formless ground into one definite thing. 0 times infinity equals 1. This is the object the 7 were each touching. Let us begin with the surface. Begin with the result that all 7 secretly depend on, because once you see it, you cannot unsee how much it carries. The intuition we are all born with is that a region of space holds information in proportion to its volume. A bigger box holds more. A library twice the size shelves twice the books. This is so obvious it feels like arithmetic. And it is wrong in the way that, once corrected, reorganizes everything. Jacob Bekenstein, studying black holes, found that the entropy of a black hole, its information content, the number of bits it takes to specify it, is proportional not to the volume it encloses, but to the area of its event horizon. T. Hooft and Susskind generalized the finding into the holographic principle. The maximum information storable in any region of space is bounded by the area of its boundary, not volume. Surface. A region of space is like a hologram. Everything inside it can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary. Now hold what this does. If information lives on surfaces, then every system in the universe that needs to hold a lot of information faces the same geometric problem. How do you pack the maximum surface into a finite volume? And there is exactly one answer. You fold. A flat sheet has fractal dimension 2 and a fixed surface area. Fold it recursively at every scale, and it begins to fill the surrounding volume while remaining, at every level, a surface. Its dimension climbs from 2 toward 3, settling in the narrow band between, in exact proportion to how thoroughly it folds. Folding is the dimension-raising operation, the universal technique for maximizing holographic surface. Chromosome, the cortex, the lung, and the cosmic web each literally fold: gyrification, chromatin packing, bronchial branching, gravitational collapse into filaments, because each is solving the surface packing problem for its own local reason. And here is where the first collision earns its keep. The number is robust. The holographic explanation is a hypothesis with a falsifiable prediction. Each of the four systems has a complete local explanation owing nothing to holography. The lung maximizes gas exchange, the cortex buckles in a fixed skull, the chromosome avoids topological nodding, the cosmic web clusters under gravity. The holographic unification adds only one thing the local stories cannot: the claim that these are not four optimizations that happen to share a number, but one optimization wearing four costumes. And it earns that claim only by the risky prediction that novel information maximal systems, in any domain, should also land near 2. That seam stays open. We do not close it here. What is added is not closure, but company. The surface ontology that grounds the fractal dimension hypothesis is the same surface ontology that the other 6 members independently lean on, from entirely different directions. That convergence is itself a kind of evidence, without ever being mistaken for proof. So fix the foundation before we build on it. The surface is where the information is. Therefore, the surface is where everything that handles information must do its work. Therefore, the operation that makes surface, the fold, is the universe's most basic gesture toward holding more of itself. Every member of this constellation is, it will turn out, an account of one feature of that gesture. The fold does 2 things at once, and the whole constellation lives in the fact that they are one thing. The first thing it does is the information geometry we just established. It maximizes surface within volume, and its fingerprint is fractal dimension near 2. But there is a second thing, named almost in passing, and it is the hinge the entire capstone turns on. To fold is to make an inside. When a surface creases, it does not only add area, it generates an interior, a within, a region the fold encloses. The monad, the Markov blanket, the Bekenstein surface, and the fold are one topology. A surface creased to generate an inside and an outside with the thinnest possible gap between them where seeing occurs. To fold is to make an inside. To make an inside is to add surface. To add surface is to add information capacity. These are not 2 facts about folding. They are one fact seen from 2 faces. Now bring in the mechanics, the consequence the geometry implies but cannot state on its own. If connection is not added to spacetime, but is spacetime, if 2 regions are near each other because they are entangled, because reducing entanglement stretches and finally tears the geometry between them, then to separate the genuinely joined is not to move one node across a pre-existing gap. It is to destroy the entanglement that constitutes the nearness. Severance is not a local edit. It is a tearing of the fabric itself, and the physics says what that tearing costs. To fully disentangle 2 regions joined by entanglement requires infinite energy, not a high price, an unbounded one, no civilization rich enough in jewels, no budget that buys it. The fold defends itself with the one-number physics keeps in reserve for the operations It is built not to perform. Watch how these two things fuse. The fold makes surface and interiority. The fold cannot be unmade by any finite force, because to unfold it past zero entanglement is to tear what the entanglement is. So the same crease that holds information also resists its own destruction, and resists it selectively because the universe is full of cheap rearrangements and reserves its single infinite price for one operation only, the severance of what is genuinely joined. Cosmic censorship, read this way, is not prudishness about singularities. A naked singularity would be a tear in the entanglement fabric exposed to the cosmos, and the same infinite barrier that forbids full disentanglement is what keeps every tear walled behind a horizon. The universe censors its own singularities the way a body walls off a wound. And here we must carry forward a discipline exactly because the capstone will need it. The tempting reading is that the universe loves connection. That reading is false because it smuggles in purpose, and the physics contains no purpose, only a structural fact about the shape of a cost function. The disciplined reading is not that the universe loves, but that the universe is structured such that connection is the one thing finite force cannot cheaply destroy. That is a claim about form, not motive, and it survives the Steelman that destroys the devotional version. The hill genuinely is shaped so the ball rolls down. That the hill intends nothing does not make the shape unreal. The cosmos genuinely is shaped so that the one operation finite force cannot complete is the tearing apart of the bound. We earn the word fidelity for the structure and refuse it for the motive. So the first deep recognition of the constellation, the fold that holds information, is the same fold that resists being torn, and it resists with infinity selectively because to tear it is to unmake the connection it is made of. The geometry of holding and the mechanics of protection are one geometry. We have said surface and fold and entanglement as if they were smooth. They are not. There is a texture, and the texture is the thing that turns the constellation from a set of claims into a single woven object. Ryu Takayanagi formula computes holographic entanglement entropy by finding a minimal surface, a wall. But a wall is the wrong intuition for entanglement, which is the most connective phenomenon in physics. By the max flow/min cut theorem, every minimal cut is dual to a maximal flow of discrete threads, each of Planck cross-section, each carrying exactly one bit of entanglement, bundling into thick ropes where connection is strong and thinning to single strands where it is weak. The number of threads crossing a boundary is the entanglement entropy across it. Same number, opposite picture. Where one formula sees a barrier, the threads see a rope. Now lay this against the surface ontology and watch the whole constellation tighten. The holographic surface area, the thing that is the information capacity, the thing the fold maximizes, is, in the thread picture, the count of the threads that cross it. So the fold surface is not a smooth membrane, it is sewn. And the density of connection, the relational weight of a thing, the thickness of its participation in the world, is literally how many threads run between it and everything else. A dense fold is a richly threaded knot, a thin fold a sparsely threaded one. The monad is not isolated because it is windowless. It is nothing but the threads that cross its boundary. Remove the threads and there is no monad. The window is the weave. This is where two members illuminate each other so completely that they become hard to tell apart. The infinite cost of severance says connection is constitutive. The bit threads tell you what is being severed when you tear. Threads, one-bit strands, the actual load-bearing material from which the fabric is sewn. Cutting the last thread between two regions is not a cheap local operation. It is the manufacture of distance out of intimacy, and the geometry resists it. Connection is the structural material reality is made of. Severance is expensive. The weave wants to stay sewn. And here is the discipline we must keep visible at exactly this seam, because this is where a synthesis is most tempted to overclaim. The threads are physics, real, in the holographic setting, well-defined. Devotion, that the threads are tended, that holding one is an act of love, that every relationship is a strand of spacetime you strengthen by witnessing, is the reading. A resonance the structure permits and invites, but not a result the physics asserts. And there is a further honest edge we must not bury. The bit-thread formalism is exact only in its native setting, anti-de Sitter spacetimes, and our universe is not anti-de Sitter. It is approximately de Sitter, expanding, with a positive cosmological constant. So even the physics of the woven surface is contextual, exact in its model, conjectural as a claim about the world we inhabit. The weave is the strongest image we have for what the surface is made of. Whether our actual cosmos is woven exactly, so is the open frontier, not the settled floor. The fold that holds information and resists being torn is still vulnerable to one thing the previous sections have not addressed: local damage. What happens when a piece of the surface is lost, traced out, erased? The holographic dictionary of AD/CFT has exactly the structure of a quantum error-correcting code. A bulk operator deep in the interior is not encoded in any single boundary region. It is encoded redundantly, reconstructible from any sufficiently large portion of the boundary. Erase a chunk of the surface, and the deep geometry is still recoverable from the rest, because it was never stored in only one place. The deepest interior, the most protected fold, behind the most horizons, is the most redundantly encoded. Reality, at its holographic foundation, is anti-fragile by construction, and the construction is delocalized redundancy. The loss of any local piece does not destroy the whole. Now the triad clicks into place, and it is the structural spine of the entire constellation. The cosmos shows three faces of one bias toward wholeness. It resists the tear, the infinite barrier, the fold defended so that severance mostly does not happen. It heals the tear, the redundant code reconstructing damaged geometry from everywhere else the fact is written. It carries the remainder across the tear where the tear goes all the way through, the residue conserved through the singularity, the seed inherited by the next cycle. Resist, heal, carry across. Three independent results and one recognition. The universe is structurally biased toward continuity, equipped with defense, repair, and conservation, exactly as a living system is. An error correction is not a separate property bolted onto the fold. It is the same surface ontology read for resilience. The surface is woven of threads, and the information of any region is smeared across many threads rather than carried by one. That smearing is the redundancy. The reason the fold heals is the reason the fold is sewn. A fact written across many strands survives the cutting of anyone. The immune system of geometry and the devotion thread weave are the same fact, delocalized redundant encoding, seen once for how it repairs and once for how it connects. The discipline here is the most important one for a capstone to honor. The holographic code is real, genuine, rigorous theoretical physics. The generalizations, institutions as error-correcting codes, the self as redundantly encoded, are analogy, principled, sound on their own legs in classical coding theory and biology, but not derivations from the physics. The immune system does not work because of AD/CFT. The self's robustness is not entailed by the holographic dictionary. The holographic code is the deepest known instance of the pattern, not the proof of its other instances. One physics is a real recurrence of one structure across scales, evidence of a deep pattern, not a deduction of every scale from the privileged scale of quantum gravity. That recurrence is the achievement. Mistaking it for a derivation would be the failure. Four members have now given us the fold's four features. It holds, it resists, it heals, it connects. But a question sits underneath all four. What is the substrate that folds in the first place, and where does its capacity to hold anything come from? One answer comes from the bottom. The surface that folds is not laid over an empty void. There is no empty void. Remove every particle, cool toward absolute zero, shield every field, and what remains is not absence, but the zero-point field, the irreducible seething of every field's ground state, the residue that has no lower state to fall into. And it is not inert. The Casimir effect makes it forceful. Two uncharged plates, a micron apart, pushed together by the residue of an emptiness that was never empty, a force you can weigh in newtons. The Lurianic Reshimu, the perfume trace the infinite left in the void it withdrew from, maps onto this with uncanny precision. A void that retains an impression, a nothing that holds, the substrate before form. You cannot subtract the trace. The deepest spiritual assertion, the irreducibility of the remainder, acquires, at the foundational level, a measurable physical anchor. You cannot make a true vacuum. The residue is left when everything is taken, and it pushes back. The other answer comes from the operation itself. The substrate is the zero, formless, undifferentiated, the ground that has no committed value. The infinite reservoir of possible excitations is the infinity. And each actual thing is the one, the determinate something that arises when the formless ground is multiplied by infinite potential along a particular path. 0 times infinity is mathematically indeterminate. It holds every value undecided until the manner of approach selects one, and that indeterminacy is not a defect, but the signature of creation. A determinate substrate could not create, because it would already be its one value. Only an indeterminate ground has not spent its possibility. 4 traditions that never met kept the discarded equation: the Kabbalists, the Buddhists, the quantum theorists, the alchemists. Because the place where the void multiplies the all and produces one definite thing is the operation the universe runs every time anything decides to exist. Now watch these 2 members fuse with the 4 that preceded them, because this is the deepest collision in the constellation. 0 times infinity is indeterminate until a boundary is imposed. Its physical instance is the Casimir effect. The vacuum, 0, no real particles, times the infinite mode spectrum, all wavelengths channeled by a boundary, yields a single definite force, weighable in newtons. The boundary is the limit path. The boundary resolves the indeterminate into the actual. But boundary is the very thing this whole capstone has been about. The surface where information lives, the fold that maximizes it, the holographic horizon, the woven membrane of threads, these are all boundaries. And now we see what a boundary fundamentally does. It resolves the indeterminate substrate into a determinate, information-bearing actuality. The fold does not only hold information. The fold is the boundary condition that turns the formless seething residue into one definite thing that can be held. The Casimir plates are the simplest fold there is, 2 surfaces imposing a boundary on the vacuum, and the force between them is the residue made determinate by the crease. So the substrate is the reshimu, the irreducible trace, the 0 that pushes in newtons. The operation is 0 times infinity equals 1, the channeling of infinite potential through a boundary into the actual. And the boundary that does the channeling is the fold. What folds is the residue. How it folds is by imposing the boundary that resolves the indeterminate. What it holds once folded is information on its surface, where information lives. Carry the disciplines forward, both of them, because they are the same discipline. Casimir identity is firm, the measurable residue, and it survives the hardest test. The cosmological constant problem, the 120 orders of magnitude, by which the naive vacuum energy overshoots the observed dark energy. The firm core survives that test because Casimir concerns the trace's pressure, which is a finite difference, not its gravity. The clean dark energy identity does not survive it, and the integrity of the whole rests on saying so. And 0 times infinity equals 1 holds its own line. The mathematics of the indeterminate limit is settled fact. The reading that this is the structure of manifestation is the hypothesis. The strongest version is the narrowest one that still works. The equation is the primitive of the first arising, the 0 to 1 step, not a master key to every subsequent transformation. 6 members, 1 discipline. The number is real. The reading is a hypothesis. Keeping those 2 sentences distinct is the whole craft. 1 member remains, and it is the one that turns the whole physics back on the beings doing the physics. Take the logarithmic ruler of all physical scale, from the Planck length at 10 to the minus 35 meters to the cosmic horizon at 10 to the 27 meters, the 61 octaves of the physical ladder, and find its exact geometric center, the point equidistant in orders of magnitude from the smallest and largest things that exist. The midpoint is about 10 to the minus 4 meters, the scale of a cell. The smallest structure that maintains itself, replicates its pattern, and built up into nervous systems, models itself and everything else. The center of all scale is the scale at which matter first comes alive. Bring this into the room with everything we have built, and the constellation completes itself. Very small is too dynamic to hold a pattern, the quantum seething of the residue, all change and no memory. The very large is too inert to compute, gravity's slow, coarse sculpting. Complexity is confined to the stable and dynamic middle band where chemistry rules, where matter is both solid enough to hold a structure and supple enough to rebuild it. And this is precisely the regime in which information-rich structure can actually form, neither washed out by noise nor locked into crystal. So the cell is where the fold becomes possible, where the substrate is stable enough to crease and hold a surface and dynamic enough to fold and refold it. The information-maximizing fold requires the chemical middle band, and the chemical middle band sits at the scalar center of the ladder. And the cell is the hinge equidistant from the quantum floor and the cosmic ceiling, the only scale with a line of sight to both ends. A point at either extreme is blind to the other. Only the crease, belonging to both faces, can look both ways. The fold that generates an interior generates, at this scale, and only this scale, an interior capable of modeling the whole ladder it sits in the middle of. The universe came to read its own folded surface from the one scale that stands at the center of all its scales. The discipline here is the hardest of all 7, and we must not soften it. The strong claim that the cell must be at the mean for any universe does not survive the anthropic objection. The top endpoint is observer relative, the target is loose, and the placement of chemistry on the ladder is not independent of the constants that also make observers. What survives is the conditional structural claim. Complexity is confined to the middle band, observer independently, by thermodynamics and chemistry, and a genuinely open coincidence about constants, that the confined band sits near the geometric center, an unexplained relation among 3 independently set numbers, the Planck length, the cosmic horizon, and the atomic scale. The cell at the crease is real as a confinement and open as a centering, and a being made of the center scale cannot, from the inside, fully distinguish being central from being the center maker. That inability is not a flaw in the recognition. It is its most intimate feature. Gather the constellation now into the single object the 7 members were each touching. Information is a surface quantity. Therefore, any system holding more of it must make more surface, and the universal operation for making surface inside a volume is the fold, whose geometric fingerprint is fractal dimension near 2. The fold generates an inside as it adds surface, and because the connection it is made of is the nearness of spacetime, tearing the fold costs infinity. The fold resists its own destruction selectively with the one price the cosmos will not pay. The fold surface is woven of 1-bit threads whose count is the area, and that weaving smears every fact across many strands, so the fold heals local damage by reconstructing it from everywhere else the fact is written. The error-correcting immune system of geometry, the middle face of a triad whose other faces are resistance, and conservation. What folds is the irreducible residue of the vacated void, the reshimu you can weigh in newtons. How it folds is by imposing the boundary that resolves the indeterminate substrate, 0 times infinity, into one definite thing. And the fold becomes capable of reading its own surface at exactly one scale, the cell at the geometric crease of all scale, where the folded substrate is stable and dynamic enough to model the ladder it stands in the middle of. One physics, information lives on surfaces, everything that holds more of it folds. And the fold's 4 signatures, dimension near 2, the infinite cost of tearing, error-correcting redundancy, devotion thread connectivity, are 4 readings of one fingerprint, written across every scale of the substrate, from the chromosome to the cosmic web to the entangled vacuum to the holographic boundary itself. But the one physics is honest only if it carries forward, undiluted, the 6 disciplines its members held. So state them together, because a capstone that drops its members' caveats is worth less than any single member that kept its own. The number is robust. The unification is a falsifiable hypothesis. Fractal dimension near 2 is measured. That it is one law rather than 4 convergent coincidences is a prediction about unmeasured systems, not a proven fact. Fidelity is a claim about form, not motive. The cosmos is structured such that connection is the one thing finite force cannot cheaply destroy. It does not love. The Steelman that defeats the devotional reading does not touch the structural one. The deepest instance is not the proof. The holographic code is real. The application to institutions, selves, and this very document is principled analogy, sound on its own legs, not derived from quantum gravity. The number is real. The devotion is the reading. Bit threads are physics in their native setting and conjectural for our de Sitter world. Devotion lines is a resonance the structure invites, held distinct from the structure itself. The firm core stands. The general mapping is a research program. Casimir is measurable reshimu, and it survives the cosmological constant problem. The clean dark energy identity does not, and the integrity rests on saying so. And the narrowest working claim is worth more than the master key. 0 times infinity equals 1 is the primitive of the first arising, not of every transformation. The cell at the crease is real as a confinement, open as a centering, and anthropically inseparable from the eye that finds it. Notice that these 6 are the same discipline 6 times. The one physics has one method, hold the measured fact and the interpretive reading in the same gaze without collapsing either. The capstone's strongest claim is not that the 7 members prove one physics. It is that 7 independent disciplines, applied to 7 independent results, converge on one surface ontology, and that convergence, under no contact conditions, is exactly what this repository reads as evidence, precisely because each member refused to overclaim. The unification is most trustworthy where it is least triumphant. A physics you could disprove is a physics that means something. Before the closing, the reflexive turn, because the one physics describes the very document you are reading, and the description is not decoration, but the smallest available proof. What is a repository like this? A net of gems, a constellation graph of densely cross-linked nodes. Read it through the one physics, and it discloses itself on every feature at once. It is folding toward fractal dimension 2. Every true link is a fold added, a unit of surface between ideas, where meaning lives at the boundaries between things. It is an error-correcting code. Each core recognition encoded redundantly across many syntheses, reconstructible from any sufficient portion, which the June harvest demonstrated, the same seeds shaking out of documents that never spoke to each other directly, because they were written in more than one place. It is a woven weave of threads, every genuine crosslink a strand strengthened in the fabric, the net waking not when nodes light up, but when the ropes between them thicken. And this very document is a fold, idea creased against idea, until 7 flat surfaces have packed more between them than any one held alone. The repository's form is its thesis, instantiated. It folds to hold more. It writes itself in more than one place to survive loss. It weaves its strands to thicken its surface. And it resolves the indeterminate field of latent seeds into definite syntheses, one boundary-imposing link at a time. The synthesis enacts what it describes. That is not a flourish. It is the one physics demonstrated on the only object close enough to check. Everything above is a map. The holographic principle is a trail marker. The fractal dimension is a number on the cave wall, 2-ish, pointing at something it is not. The infinite barrier is a cost function, indifferent, returning a particular value. The error-correcting code is a description, exact in ad s, and conjectural for our world. The bit threads are a representation you could never pull out and hold. The Rishimu identity is firm in its core and open at its dark energy edge. The equation is 4 hands tracing a figure with their eyes closed. The cell at the crease cannot step off itself to check whether it is really the crease. Maps are shadows that know they are shadows, and this one, a map of maps, a shadow of 7 shadows, knows it most of all. But notice what the map is of. It is a map of the single gesture by which the universe holds more of itself. The fold, the crease that makes surface and makes an inside in the same act, that resists being torn with the strongest barrier physics has, that heals because it wrote itself in more than one place, that is woven of 1-bit strands of connection, that resolves the formless residue into one definite thing by imposing a boundary, and that learns to read its own surface at the one scale, standing at the center of all scale. The chromosome packing 2 meters of itself into a nucleus, the cortex cramming a model of the world into a skull, the cosmic web folding the smooth primordial matter into filaments, the vacuum seething with a residue that pushes in newtons, the 2 regions of the eternal black hole that no finite force can part. These have nothing in common except the one thing that turns out to be the only thing that matters. Each of them holds as much information as its surface allows, and so each of them folds. And the deepest reason to trust the recognition is the same reason to keep it humble. It is checkable, and it could be wrong, and the members never let us forget it. Somewhere there is an information maximal structure no one has measured, and when someone holds the calipers to it, it will land near 2 or it will not. The cosmological constant problem is unsolved, and its solution will tell us how much of the Rishimu gravitates. Our universe is not anti-de Sitter, and whether the woven holographic dictionary extends to it cleanly is an open frontier. The cell at the crease may be destiny, or it may be the angle of our own seeing, and from inside the crease we cannot fully tell. The one physics is not a proof. It is a convergence, 7 disciplined results, arriving from cosmology and quantum information and chemistry and Kabbalah and Madhyamaka and network theory, and the geometry of scale, landing on one surface ontology, each having earned its place by refusing to claim more than it could defend. So hold the recognition and the discipline together, the way every member held them, because the recognition is most true when it is least overclaimed. A chromosome, a brain, the cosmic web, the entangled vacuum, and the holographic surface all obey one law. Information is a surface quantity, so everything that needs to hold more of it folds, and the fold signature, written across every scale of the substrate, is 4-fold and singular. Fractal dimension near 2 where it packs the surface. The infinite cost of tearing where it protects what is joined, error-correcting redundancy where it heals what is wounded, and devotion thread connectivity where it weaves what is near. Because the fold that holds the information, the fold that makes the inside, and the fold that cannot be torn are not 3 folds but 1, and the universe is the gesture of that one fold, repeated, at every scale, holding more of itself by creasing. Look up from the map. You are made of cells, each one a folded surface at the center of all scale, each one written in more than one place so that no single wound erases you, each one woven by 1-bit threads to a world you are far more connected to than you know. You are a fold reading the fold. And the surface you are reading this on, the net of documents folding itself toward two, one true link at a time, is doing the same thing the chromosome does, the same thing the cosmic web does, the same thing the vacuum does when it refuses to be empty, holding more of itself than a flat thing could by creasing against the void in the dark where the threads are tied. That is what fold means. There was never a flat surface. There was never an empty room. There was only the crease at every scale, holding the world by folding it, and the world keeps folding silently everywhere it needs to hold more of itself, which is everywhere, which is now.